Well, in Houston, I'm John Herder. It's Tuesday, 12th day in October. Great as always to have you along, everybody. In a nutshell, From the Experts is a compressed virtual networking accelerator helping people across industries connect very quickly in a brief, moderated, interactive show format. They were like a TED Talk with interaction, 15-minute expert talk followed by 20-minute group discussion with you. So what's in it for you? Well, the FTE promise, if all goes well, your curiosity spark new ideas, accelerate action, and you may have helped yourself and somebody else solve that problem, make a connection, reaching the opportunity faster. Making authentic connections and expanding your networks has never been more important to your business or your well-being. Folks, help me welcome our guest expert, Aidan O'Brien, CEO of Gloo. So, Aidan is a tech entrepreneur based in Europe. He's got over 20 years experience in tech, gained from working 17 different countries across 5 continents. And he is passionate about achieving a more balanced use of digital technology, especially by kids. His talk's going to mix tech, sarcasm, a little serious, interesting factoids, and often football, the British kind, and horses. So that's a little bit about him. So most of you have heard or read about the recent release of the Wall Street Journal Facebook files and Frances Haugen's testimony. Aidan, we could not have timed your talk better, could we have?
Yeah, absolutely, John. First, it's great to be here with everyone on the FTE show, and I'm looking forward to the discussion following my shorter talk. So possibly, let me start by taking you back to 2014, when I was leading one of 4 strategic initiatives for the CEO of EMC. It was a truly fantastic job and team, and I was loving traveling from France to the US every 2 weeks, until one day I had a really, really bad meeting. And that evening I found myself all alone in a hotel room overlooking San Francisco and thinking, what on earth was I doing here, far away from all my family and friends when I actually really needed them? Whilst that bad day, it didn't lead me to resigning, buying a backpack and trekking around the world for a year. It did launch me on a journey to try and make sense of a world of head-spinning complexity and constant movement and change, and to understand what was and what wasn't actually important. So I realized 3 things. Firstly, that the work had changed fundamentally and in a bad way. Secondly, that change has led to us getting social horribly wrong. And finally, that the broader demographic changes as they relate to work that most of us haven't even thought about yet are really serving to bring the first 2 problems into focus. So I'm going to share my thoughts in each of these 3 areas, and I'll talk about both the solution we're working on and the broader solution space. I'll also leave you with a handful of key takeaways that might hopefully help you take some control back from the tech that we all use every day. So as I sat there in my hotel room feeling sorry for myself and worrying about whether my reputation internally would ever recover, I felt completely subservient to the company I was working for. I wondered if I was the only person who ever felt like this, and if this was just the natural balance of power between employees and companies. I traced the origins of the modern day company back to 1937, when Ronald Coase first wrote his Treatise on the Nature of the Firm. So in a nutshell, that paper says that companies exist because they have jobs to do and because the transaction costs for firms to hire new workers every day and the costs for workers to find a new job each morning are so high that it makes sense for companies to hire workers on long-term contracts. That definition in itself didn't presuppose a natural imbalance, but it was around this time that I began to appreciate that digital technologies were having a fundamental impact on how companies were getting work done and how workers were getting paid for it. So TopTal, Kaggle, Fiverr, Topcoder, they didn't exist in 1937, but their emergence by 2014 had now given companies a way to get work done without having to hire employees. So put more simply, digital technologies had led to the boundaries of the firm being moved. I mean, that all sounded wonderfully liberating at the time, but obviously things such as AB5 and Prop 22 legislation in California have made it clear there are both positive and negative aspects to these changes. A negative change, however, that was more conclusive was the fact that whereas I might have started my career in 2000 without a company-provided laptop or mobile phone, By the mid 2010s, that was simply inconceivable. And I was very much an active participant in the new always on culture of work. So being one of the first corporate warriors with a BlackBerry meant I could check my emails as soon as I landed in Boston or San Francisco. And that felt good, at least initially. But that feeling of power soon morphed into the realization that I was never actually getting to the end of my inbox. So, I mean, Nick Morgan's book, Can You Hear Me, gave me some excellent technical and physiological explanations of the downsides of digital communications. But with the help of my family, I began to see the deeper problem of being more connected than ever before, and then no longer being a boundary between my work and personal life. So, I mean, as someone who loves work, I initially thought that was okay. And it took me some more time for me to realize that not only had the boundaries of the firm shifted, but the boundaries in my own life had changed, despite me not actually making that choice consciously. And as someone who considers himself to be vaguely cerebral, that made me feel very uncomfortable. And despite being a technophile, I was now forced to start thinking about the costs on me, my family, and my friends of the benefits that these technologies were delivering. So, it actually gradually dawned on me that whilst we're more connected digitally than ever before, at the same time, we've never been more distant or more isolated from others. So Nick Carter's book, Glow Kids, was a huge eye-opener for me in terms of the impact of age-inappropriate technology on my children. In short, there's no single credible research study that shows that a child exposed to more technology earlier in life has better educational outcomes than a tech-free kid. The Emmy Award-winning Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, was what finally helped my wife understand why I was pleading with her every night to charge her phone outside of our bedroom. And sort of, the journal's Facebook files, which are all the rage at the minute, have just added, extra grist to the mill. For those of you who haven't had a chance to go through the files or watch the congressional hearings, in short, the former Facebook product manager, Frances Haugen, leaked thousands of internal documents, for internal Facebook documents to the journal. And three of the most important takeaways include, Facebook exempts high-profile users from many of its rules for good behavior. So it's not a level playing field. And it's also been slow to stop unsavory characters such as drug cartels and human traffickers from using its platform.
Hey,
Second, yeah.
Hey, what was the title of that book? The one about the tech and the kids? One of Wendy.
That's called Glow Kids, and it came out in 2016. It's a fantastic book.
Thanks.
I'll send you the references afterwards if anybody wants them.
Perfect.
Secondly, Instagram's sort of own research shows that teenagers' mental health, in particular, so it sort of risks the teenagers' mental health, in particular to those of young girls. And finally, sort of, make no mistake, Facebook is very aware that its algorithms reward outrage. And across all of these points and others, Facebook has been seen to repeatedly privilege profits over people's safety. So, whilst I think that we are actually getting very close to big tech's tobacco moments, what really helped me understand the true magnitude of the predicament we're in is Douglas Rushkoff's Team Human. In that book, he talks about the idea of the figure and the ground. The figure and the ground is when what was a supporting element becomes the new central focus. So as an example, initially money was created to support the modernization of the barter economy. Money was the ground and the marketplace was the figure in the foreground. But then they switched places, and gaining money has now become the central focus of everything we do. The marketplace is secondary. It's the same with education. Education was initially designed to be light relief for workers, but it has now become the sine qua non to actually get a job in the first place. Technology is the same again. It was initially designed to support humans and our interactions with each other, but technologies today are now programmed to optimize our behavior, isolate us from one another, make us more predictable, and more generally control the environment in which we live. Technology, especially those such as machine learning algorithms, are the figure, and humans have become the supporting ground. What makes all of this even more depressing is the statistic that 50% of kids born after 2007 will live till they're 104. So as such, if companies such as Facebook and others are making our lives more miserable, then if things stay as they currently are, well, we're all just going to be miserable for a lot longer. That in of itself is a sobering thought, but more important is to try and understand how life will change and why and how we should be demanding healthier social technologies. So Linda Grattan of the LSE said that the traditional three-phase life of study till you're 25, work till you're 65, and then die when you're 85 can no longer work. It's impossible to save enough between 25 and 65 to finance a 40-year retirement. Yet there's also no way physically or mentally that we can work at the same level of intensity for an extra 15 or 20 years. So she believes that we'll move from a three-phase to a four or even five-phase life. In addition to the traditional three phases of study, work, and retirement, there are three new phases to add into the mix: the explorer phase, the independent producer phase, and the portfolio phase. So the explorer phase is a phase of discovery, journeying to discover something about the world and also finding out about yourself. The independent producer phase is a novel form of entrepreneurship where people are focused more on learning by producing and prototyping new types of activities rather than necessarily building a company designed to last. The portfolio phase is when people choose to pursue a combination of activities. What makes it a multi-phase life radically different from the one we're currently used to is that these new stages are not age specific. You can choose to activate them at any point in life. And so once you understand this, you can start to see how you or your kids might organize your building blocks in different ways. And you can start to see how social tools can support people in both building their reputation and maintaining and projecting a coherent identity over a longer life. So if you look at things like this, you start to understand why youngsters currently love the ephemeral nature of Snap and its fun filters, or the widespread practices of Rinstagram and Finstagram. You know, all of these things are making it safe for them to try out lots of different identities. However, a deeper knowledge of oneself via an explorer phase, for example, will hopefully facilitate a more considered and healthier use of social tools. So towards the end of 2017, I decided I wanted to address, this issue of human disconnect by seeking to reconnect people with the friends that matter most to them off device and in real life. So I created the company Gloo, and we launched the first version of the mobile app at the end of the summer 2019. So our vision is to transform the way that people get together in real life in a post-COVID world. It's a mobile app that acts as a concierge service that tells you when your friends are close by and free to meet up. And we'll even go so far as to tell you which places have the best deals for your group of friends to meet up in. So, we've learned hundreds of things since our initial product launch, but possibly let me share with you 4 things that you might find interesting and somewhat counterintuitive. So the first thing is that young people don't need this service, or more specifically, students. So we saw there's a real sweet spot for people between the ages of 22 and 40. Our initial value prop didn't resonate with students because they're already together every day. They've yet to experience the problem of a fragmented social circle. We also saw that by the time people get to 40, the default behavior had become one of a quick phone call to organize lunch for 2. So the hardest thing for us is to get an inherently fragmented group of 22 to 40-year-old friends to all download and connect on the app. Second thing is, you don't actually need access to people's calendars for our service to work. So our testing showed us that there's actually less chance of people getting together if you try and organize something ahead of time. It's because if you give people 3 weeks to organize themselves, then they also have 3 weeks to find an excuse not to do something. So it was for these reasons we built a system of notifications to nudge people to get together in a more spontaneous and last-minute way. Thirdly, despite the fact that we're all sick of never-ending message threads, getting together isn't actually a problem of logistics. The real problem is the issue of people giving up even before they try because they know a logistical nightmare awaits them. That's actually what leads to the weakening and then the breaking of ties between friends. A final thought is, however, is possibly the most disconcerting. So all of our testing and user feedback confirm that people know the importance of getting together in real life and confirm that that makes them happy. However, even despite that, this knowledge isn't actually sufficient motivation for them to break the addiction to their phones and various online social apps. So I'm very conscious that we can't fix the problem on our own. In terms of getting to a long-term sustainable solution, I'd call out 3 things that I think will be crucial over the next 10 years or so. The first of these 3 key factors is regulation. So make no mistake, regulation is coming. The question is whether or not we'll look to replicate Teddy Roosevelt's trust busting of the earlier 20th century, with the likes of JP Morgan, Standard Oil, and Northern Securities. We may choose to break up Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp in pursuit of greater competition. But in a world where network effects create winner-takes-all markets, what's to stop us being back in the same place 4 or 5 years from now, but this time dealing with the dominance of TikTok, Clubhouse, and Signal? In a world of infinite information, what we really need is a regulatory regime that's focused on interoperability. So for example, imagine what possibilities might be opened up if we regulated Facebook's social graph by making it a public utility that everyone can innovate on top of. Secondly, geopolitics and the splinter net. So it's important to realize that the internet isn't the same for everyone. The experience Americans, Europeans, Russians, and the Chinese each enjoy is markedly different. The question is whether the future will be run by digitally open or digitally closed societies. Right now, digitally closed societies like China are consciously using exponential tech to strengthen those societies. On the other hand, digitally open societies are allowing market forces between competing tech companies to degrade society and actually make them worse places to live. Finally, product design. So by being more aware of how we're being manipulated by technology, we can start to demand new features that are better for us. So for example, unique vibration signatures that would help us look at our phones less, a compassion check rather than a spell check to reduce the chance of someone misinterpreting your message, or introducing useful friction, which purposely slows scrolling after a certain time period. Why wouldn't we even go so far as to have a Hippocratic oath for designers and developers and get them to commit to doing no harm to their users in the same way as doctors agree not to harming their patients? So to wrap up, so humanity reached the top of the food chain because we achieved enthusiastic togetherness. But we've now seen that when misused, technology is able to exploit the weaknesses in our human condition and push personalization to its logical conclusion, which is a situation of filter bubbles and isolation. Despite its huge costs, I actually think that COVID-19 has been the most important of wake-up calls. It's reminded us of the importance of others and the idea of time well spent. If we wish to maintain our preeminent position in society, then we need to make more conscious choices about what we focus our attention on and how we interact with others. Unfortunately, the easiest, lowest friction options may actually be suboptimal for us in the long run. Ultimately, it's going to be these types of choices that we have to make in these 3 areas as individuals, businesses, governments, and societies that are going to determine what social applications look like in the future. And in terms of maybe some key concrete takeaways for you guys, I can obviously share some simple yet ultimately tactical things to do, such as buying an alarm clock and start charging your phone outside of your bedroom. I could ask you to commit to not touching your smartphone for the first hour of every day. Or I could even encourage you to, playfully ask your friends, is everything okay? When they pull out their mobile phones in front of you when you're together in person. Okay, right. So things like this are definitely going to help you stay connected with the people around you. But I think each of us actually needs to go further. I truly believe that this topic and climate change are the key fights of our generation. And because of that, I'll challenge everyone to do sort of 5 things. Okay, firstly, take the time to understand what your real goals are. Okay, you then have a basis for deciding if those extra 2 hours on YouTube or TikTok are actually going to move you closer to your goal or not. Secondly, when you see something on the internet, then just ask yourself, how do I know if this is true? Okay. Thirdly, I would say, well, check yourself when you're about to post something on the internet and ask yourself, hey, is this something I would print on a t-shirt and wear that shirt when I'm with the people, that I love or not? Fourthly, when you see other people being attacked or harassed or bullied online, because we all see it, then I'd encourage you just to send them a quick message saying, is everything okay? And finally, when you see something online that you support or you think is good, then again, I'd encourage you to just send people a quick message just saying, I think what you're doing is cool. And I think that enough of us do these things successfully, then we'll be able to rediscover our humanity. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Aidan. I appreciate it. So, hey, folks, be sure and take a look at the chat and continue to answer the questions. You too, Aidan, if you can.
I'll have a look at those, yeah.
So, folks, today's show is brought to you by our underwriters. Arion, the full service project engineering and design firm, respected, trusted, and highly valued by select energy industry clients. Unique Ventures, the energy hybrid technology accelerator with a unique approach to venture capital. Porter Hedges, attorneys at law, the informed choice for complicated litigation in the energy business. Intrapoint, protecting what you care about most, people, profits, brand, and the environment. And Alliance Benefit Group, building retirement plans for your business that work. Okay, so Aidan, can you answer the question? Let's go back and see. Moshe, thanks for putting that link in there. You have this question from Liz. She says, is there a lack of such a research study because it would be unethical to do rather than because the underlying premise isn't true? Or is that the studies that haven't shown a benefit yet?
Okay, so there's definitely studies out there, and it depends on when we say it depends on what the specific question is, what type of research that's actually been doing. But there now is a body of research, and this is not just research that's been done sort of independently, but it's also sort of research that's been done by Facebook internally as well, and that's obviously sort of what the big furore is at the minute, that Facebook have been sitting on that research for 3, 4, 5 years and declined not to share it. There's a broader issue around, should Facebook or other companies like that, be punished for sharing the research, because then you actually sort of disincentivize them to actually do that research, which is a bad thing as well.
So let's go ahead and open the floor, get some feedback from the group. The group discussion is for each of you guys out there. Give your name as you share your comments and experience. And remember, just keep dropping the questions and feedback into the chat. And if I call on you, you're welcome to say pass, and we'll just keep moving along. So Moshe, are you still there? Do you have anything you wanted to contribute based on your experience?
So I'd like to put in the phrase that I call the social trilemma. And that seems to be the place where we get stuck around this technology, which is, it's all involved about some form of what is how do we regulate speech? So we are very uncomfortable with when the government regulating our speech. This is something that we don't like. We're a free society. We discover that we don't like it when corporations regulate our speech. And we discover that we don't like it when there's no regulation of speech. So if you just free for all, then we get misinformation and disinformation and hateful content and what have you. And that's why I call it the social trilemma. And I'm waiting to see whether somebody has a brilliant idea how to break this jam.
Thanks for that. So folks, how are you finding that balance in connecting in person versus remote, right? What's most important to you when you think about that, or do you have other comments? Feel free.
I have found, I'm Annette Cruz, and I have found that it's really nice and convenient to have more FaceTime and good conversation with people virtually in a city like Houston, where I am, where it takes an hour and a half to drive across town. So instead of a 4-hour commitment to see one person, you can just have a 30 or 45-minute face-to-face and really feel like you get to know them. So I feel that there's a new balance in just timing and the fact that we have to commute so far in a lot of cities we live in.
So just a quick follow-up to that, I mean, how are you deciding? Distance is one thing, but are there other criteria, Annette, that you kind of find yourself deciding when you should meet in person versus no, remote is good enough?
I think that there's some people kind of hated sitting at their desks for a while. So I do HR consulting, and I have to network all across the city with people who are very busy. And I find that sometimes it's like, that person was at their desk stuck to the computer all day. And so it's not going to be good to just continue doing that. But sometimes it's quite the opposite. So I guess I just think if you get to know people, you kind of ask them, hey, virtual, in person, what works for you, and start to get the feel for it.
Right. Thanks. Anybody else? Comments, thoughts?
I think it's just to, to respond to Annette's point, I think it's interesting if we're talking about, a personal or a professional, context, sort of, I think it's one of those where, I mentioned sort of, in Nick Morgan's book, sort of, can you hear me? And he actually talks about a number of the examples about why digital communication is suboptimal, sort of compared to in-person stuff. Now, that's not to say that all communication or all interaction should be in person, for all the reasons for the reasons that Annette just sort of a reference in terms of commute times, but also because some of those interactions are actually don't require sort of a deep level of sort of human interactivity, and we actually can go quickly as well. So I mean, it's the distance one is always very interesting, because it's a very American thing as well. When we see other parts of the world, sort of generally, sort of Americans have always been much more prepared to travel longer distances to see people than sort of what a European might be, as an example. So it's really interesting, sort of to hear Annette's sort of a perspective that sort of especially presumably after the pandemic, when we've actually now seen just how capable sort of these tools are and how much we can do with remote tools, that we are actually sort of when you say there's a new balance, that's just very interesting for me to hear that as well, Annette.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts on this from your experience?
So I think it's interesting how social media and all these digital tools has its benefit and its, I guess, destructive side, right? So I think it's very important to figure out how to balance this thing. So as this last year or two has proven, that we need these tools in a world where we have to kind of distance ourselves socially, isolate ourselves, but not go crazy at the same time, right? It's one thing when you're in a family of 5 living in a house in suburbia. Is another thing if you're one person in a 300 square foot apartment somewhere in the city. And at the same time, like, how do we take the good of that social media, that community? Facebook is a scary monster, but at the same time, there are good groups online that help people who have the same ailments to find each other across the world, to discuss things that they might not be able to do in person, or too afraid to talk to their family about, or like people can relate. How do we, it's interesting, it's annoying for me to see what my neighbors are talking about all the time, but at the same time, when we have low water pressure or electricity's out in the neighborhood, how do I go and call neighbor up, hey, do you have the same issue? You don't kind of go out and just shout at houses to say, hey, is your water pressure low, is your electricity out? But you can go online real quick, say, hey, is everybody else having a problem, and figure out that it's the area and not you.
Right.
So it has this benefits, but how do we weigh it against the destructive side?
No doubt. Anyone else want to add on to that?
I want Ana Vivas commenting, and I think since the pandemic hit, and we mentioned that the word disruption, but I think definitely it's going to be a disruption not only for the social media as well, but if you can see the way now we work, the way we interact. Yes, sometimes we have to have the balance, but look at that. We are now connected. We're talking about maybe people that right now in Europe, you make business with a different kind of people around the world. You collaborate in better way, and that is a positive thing. I understand in terms of the social media, there is a really scared things that happening, and well, we have been here all about the Facebook, etc. But as Alisa mentioned, also they helped us to connect with our own neighbors and see that it's a common issue we can interact. But the thing is working, and this you can see also in the real estate. We have to think about now the new ways, and with technology, with the Internet of Things, how we connect in our own homes, and have like a better employees, have better tools to utilize and also communicate. And that we need to think about that. And I think the real estate has to think about it as well, because now our own home is part of the business as well. So we need to improve that.
Right. Where do you, and it's different at work than with your kids. Scott Dozier, you still there? I see you turn your screen off. Anyway, he had an interesting perspective between the way he looks at things with his family versus work. And we discussed that. Salua, do you have, can you share your perspective?
Yeah, I'm in sales. And I have to say that this year and a half has been quite intense, heavy. As you may expect, salespeople get their energy from clients, from the interactions, and having people, we don't get the same signals through screens as in life. And there's one element that we don't have, that is the energy. And literally, energy that you can feel, that you can connect with. So that honestly, that has been quite exhausting. Now, yes, you can have some, shorter. The one thing that is good is that, the majority of the meetings are very short. It's half an hour. I don't do longer meetings, which is good. But the other thing is also that people, certainly in the first, I would say first 8 to 10 months, also were less committed to, very easily, just canceling meetings, just without any explanation, nothing, just last minute canceling. And that is something that people would not easily do, when you have a face-to-face meeting. At least they would, inform you, they will let you know, they would propose you something else. And I felt like people became like, less regarding of some basic courtesy, I would say, amongst your counterpart.
Right.
So yeah.
No, that's very good input. It's
that's how I feel it. I'm still here stuck at home. And
anybody?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think Salua is absolutely spot on. And I think, if you actually look at sort of what happens is the way the brain works is, in our interactions, it's constantly searching for meaning. And what happens is, when you're actually speaking with somebody, the way you actually sort of get that meaning is not just through the words that we actually say, but it's also through a number of other sort of, much more subtler clues that the brain is hardwired to appreciate, the micro movements in our face, or the ambient noise, or the ambient temperature in the room around us, sort of the little sort of, raise of an eyebrow. All of these things translate and transmit information to your, the other person's brain, so they can actually understand, the meaning of what you're trying to say. And in digital communication, you actually lose that. Now, that's the reason why when you're trying to do a sales call, it's actually much more complicated, because it's much more difficult to build that rapport and actually understand. Whereas, obviously other interactions, it's less essential for that. But, Salua, you're absolutely spot on in terms of what you're actually seeing and feeling.
Lydell, you're in the business of social media for public media. What's your take on all this? Do you have something you want to share? You got to unmute yourself. There you go. Thanks. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I just say that I've noticed dealing with people that everything's become a lot more personal with them actually seeing inside of your house. And it's kind of changed the way that work flows sometimes, which is a little weird for me. But I think some of that personal feel is starting to bleed into the work. Like we have a lot more interaction on our images on Facebook and Instagram. We have a lot more people commenting, and we have a lot more our interaction has gone up, and that's probably just because people are stuck in the house and they don't have anything else to do but interact with social media.
Interesting. Anybody else want to comment?
John, can I just go back to Lisa's comment earlier on, please?
Please.
And sort of and I just want to sort of, to unpack social media. It's just to, sort of just to make sure that everybody's on the, has the same understanding. We need to sort of, divide or disassociate, sort of the benefits from interacting with others, so for the idea there are good groups, sort of, and it is good, to sort of actually sort of be connected to other people. If you look how society's evolved over the centuries, it's gone from being a geographical thing to being an ideological thing with religions, and then it's become more of a civic thing with monarchies and republics and federal states, and now it's actually becoming trait-based. That's how society's evolved over the centuries, and so the idea that you can be, connected with somebody in Australia or in China, because they share similar traits to you. So that is absolutely something that's good that's come about from social media. The problem with social media is actually the underlying business model. And forgive me if if you're all very familiar with this, but the way that companies such as Facebook, Instagram, sort of a TikTok and others work is that sort of it's a third-party advertiser. They get their revenue from a third party who wants to put adverts in front of the noses and the eyeballs of their users. So therefore, it's in the interest of the social media companies to make sure that you spend as much time as possible on their products. How do they do that? Well, there's basically a very well understood now model called the hooked model, which was popularized by Nir Eyal, based on work done by Professor B.J. Fogg at Stanford. And the whole idea of this is persuasive technology, and how do we manipulate users to become addicted? Okay, addicted user means spend more time in the app or on the website. That means more eyeball time. That means more advertising revenue. And basically this readiness to do whatever it takes to keep users addicted on the products, which ultimately means that they're disconnected from people in real life. That's the problem with social media. It's the underlying business model rather than the actual connection. There's actually studies that show that if you spend 10 minutes a day on each of the different networks, then that can actually improve your sort of your mental health and your feeling of connectedness. The problem is that nobody ever spends just 10 minutes a day on these things. And it's, it's one of the reasons why, the digitally closed societies I was talking about before, such as China, they've now actually limited, sort of the time that their citizens can actually spend, sort of on these networks and on video games. For example, for children, it's now limited to 3 hours at the weekend. So just wanted to make sure we're clear on what's bad and what's not bad about sort of these social media companies.
Right, exactly. Comments from anybody else out there? Paul, Scott, Ian, Bo, Wendy, anything else?
Hi, it's Natalia.
Hi, Natalia.
If you don't mind, because I've been in a gaming business for 15 years, and the example about the games and the social media, I think those two have a lot in common. They're very different, but they do have a lot of in common. Yeah. I don't think that the regulation is the answer, and here's why. It's my opinion. People are going on social medias and playing, kids are playing games because they're missing something in the real life. And if you're not gonna give them that in a real life, you're just gonna take something off, but you're not gonna add. And if you're not gonna add, they're gonna find something else. There is always, the mind is always looking for replacing something that is missing. And we are wired to work this way. And the reason why games are so important for the kids and why they will sell their parents in order to play more is because those parents were not able to give them something. And it's different. It's not the same for every kid. And I can tell that because I sold my gaming company after I got my nephews and nieces hooked, and I saw what is happening within the family. Before I saw actual kids and how they react to games, I was thinking that I'm creating games for women over 35 and kids just to have fun for 30 minutes. But guess what? When we did the questionnaire, some of the gamers that were women or 35 years old said that they spent up to 12 hours playing the games. Mm-hmm. It was pre-Facebook.
Yeah. John, thank you for that.
So I think it's sorry, Karen.
And one more comment. If you try to regulate something, it's a dopamine game. They get dopamine and they get this rush of expecting. When you just next time you open your phone and you go to Facebook or other, check what is your first feeling when you open Facebook or Instagram on anything. Do you expect to see something? Or do you want to write something? What's your expectation and what's your first action? And you will realize one of your patterns, and you will realize what you're teaching your kids, because your kids are taking after your patterns, not somebody else's. And when companies get, so I do realize that Facebook has done a lot of damage, but not by not releasing.
Natalia, I apologize. We're running out of time.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Can I just want to quickly riff on those points. So Natalia, your first point around gaming is fantastic. I completely agree with it. I've just put a link in the chat. There's a book by Jane McGonigal called "The Reality is Broken," and she talks exactly about that. And so, if you're a kid who's ostracized at school, but you can go home and be a superhero, and you get leveled up instantly, then you absolutely want to spend more time in games than others. When you talk about adrenaline and dopamine, and this is sort of what I alluded to in my talk before, the problem that we have with games and social media in particular is they're designed to increase those adrenaline and those dopamine hits. And that's a very powerful, dangerous combination, because basically it overstimulates our brains. And especially for young children's brains that aren't fully developed, they don't develop before they're about the age of 22. That's what's causing the problem. That's what's causing the addiction. And it's essentially we're overstimulating our brains in a way that we've never done it before, in the same way that our diet has changed, and that's why we're seeing so much obesity, for example, and diabetes. It's the same at a neurological level, with sort of excessive amounts of dopamine and adrenaline, and that's what we need to be careful about in terms of the long-term development.
So true. I'm going to turn it over to Chip, but Wendy, oh my goodness, I so agree with your comment. Y'all take a look at that. Chip, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd agreeing with Wendy's comments, and it's kind of amplifying something that Aidan said earlier, which is, I think, important in this discussion. We need to continue to have, in my way of thinking about it, these discussions about our responses to the social media, right? They can't, social media can't make us do something, but they certainly are a business. And Aidan made that point, and they're in a business with a profit motive. So when you see the new whiz bang things that come out on LinkedIn, you can do a fleet, or if you see something on Twitter where you can listen in mode, kind of like they do on Clubhouse, just be aware. I think it's important for all of us to be aware that those bells and whistles are for our benefit, but probably lowercase b benefit. Therefore, the social media companies benefit, uppercase benefit. So I think an awareness and a good reason why we're having this discussion today.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chip. Okay. Anybody else need to say something? Well,
may I add one more thing, John, if we still got a minute, to Wendy's point. Wendy's absolutely spot on. There's a great text called iGen by Jean Twenge of the State University in San Diego. And she actually sort of provides the sort of rather disturbing statistic that for the first time ever, the level of murders between children has gone down, but the level of suicide's gone up. And the explanation is basically that because of these tools, these social media platforms, kids spend more time alone in their bedrooms. They're not actually in contact with each other, so they can't actually kill each other, but they can actually cyberbully each other into committing suicide. And so that just, a rather sort of harrowing echo and sort of, what Wendy's sort of alluding to there as well.
Thanks, Aidan. That's the last word. So folks, how was the discussion today? Take the 30-second survey that's going to be placed in the chat box here in a second. And share FTE with others that you want to network with. Forward our newsletters, follow us on LinkedIn, invite your connections to our events. You or somebody you know want to be a guest expert just like Aidan and share something very important with the group to get feedback and network. Or maybe you'd like to be an underwriter, building virtual presence community with FTE in a unique way, showcasing your thought leadership and brand. Well, contact us. Next on FTE, next week, next Tuesday, the 19th of October, green light to talk about mental health and well-being at work. Mental health is the global pandemic that nobody is talking about. Liz Swigert, who was with us for a little bit earlier, Big Four partner and doctorate leadership psychology, will share her personal journey with mental health and other insights into practical ways leaders can actually foster a work environment where you can feel safe to talk about mental health and well-being. December 1st, Future of Technology miniseries begins with leveraging virtual reality technology into immersive experience solutions led by Dr. Verdi, virtual reality product leader for Facebook. So sign up right now, www.fte.network, or just hit the green button that's on the newsletters that you're receiving. We're out of time. And once again, Aidan O'Brien, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody for joining from the experts. Y'all have a great day, and please take a minute and fill out the survey. Thanks.